Our next speaker is Jim Neal. He will address the library of the future from the perspective of an information technologist. It is my great pleasure to introduce Jim Neal, who is Vice President for Information Services and University Librarian, Columbia University, who has graciously and enthusiastically accepted my invitation to participate in this conference. As University Librarian at Columbia, Jim Neal provides leadership for university academic computing and network services and a system of 25 libraries. He has focused in particular on the development of the digital library, special collections, global resources, building, construction, and renovation. Previously, he served as Dean of the Johns Hopkins Libraries, 98 through 2001, Sheridan Director of Milton Eisenhower Library, 1995 to 2001, and Dean of the University Libraries at Indiana University, 98 to 95. He has also held administrative positions in the libraries at Penn State, Notre Dame, and the City University of New York. Neal has also served on the Council and Executive Board of the American Library Association, was President of the Association of Research Libraries and Chair of OCLC's Research Library Advisory Council. He earned a certificate in advanced librarianship and Masters of Science from Columbia University School of the Arts and Science, as well as an MA in History from Columbia's Graduate School of the Arts and Sciences. He is a frequent speaker at national and international conferences and published researcher in the areas of scholarly communication, digital library development, organizational change, and human resources development. To me, Jim is a long-standing colleague, an inspiration, and a friend. I welcome Jim to the conference.
Thank you very much, Judy. I went to Columbia in the fall of 2001, and shortly after I arrived, I agreed to give a series of presentations to alumni groups around the Mid-Atlantic region. That January, a very wintry period on the East Coast, I found myself driving down from New York to Philadelphia to speak to the alumni group in eastern Pennsylvania. Driving through the snow, I eventually found my way to the Holiday Inn, parked the car, went into the hotel, found the room where the meeting was going to be held. I was supposed to start my talk at 8 o'clock. By 8:15, there was only one other person in the room. I suggested that I should go forward with my presentation, and he agreed. I had slides that I was using, and I asked if he would run the slide projector as I spoke, and he agreed to do that. Gave an inspiring talk, and asked if there were any questions, and he said, no questions. I sat down briefly and realized I had this terrible ride back up the turnpike to New York City, and I said, well, I'm going to get on the road. He says, no, you're not. I said, well, I've got to go now. He says, no, you don't. I said, you don't understand. I have this terrible ride back to New York City, and I've got meetings tomorrow. I need to get back. He says, no, it's you who doesn't understand. I'm the second speaker. Well, the first aspect of that story is, boy, I'm glad that you're here. And second, a certain anxiety, if you will, about the schizophrenic background that I bring to this presentation. Trained as a librarian, thrust over my career into a whole variety of expanding information technology responsibilities, but really educated as an historian. And I always try to recall what they say about historians. How can we expect historians to project the future when they have such a difficult time predicting the past? You're supposed to laugh at that. I'm going to speak about advancing the academic research library into the future, and I'm going to, over the course of this talk, try to outline 24 planning imperatives from the information technologist's perspective. Allow me first to establish a context and ask you to think about the revolutionary environment, my word, that I think we live in the academy and in the university library today. David Close, in his book, The Meaning of Revolution, describes it as the essential feel of revolution deriving from its cataclysmic quality. destroying people's security and unsettling their convictions. Thomas Kuhn, we'll all remember in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, talks about the transition from a paradigm in crisis to a new one from which a new tradition can emerge is really not a cumulative process. And Marx, in his theory of epistemology, his theory of ideas, argues that ideas do not exist on their own. They're only real when they're translated into action. And he makes a very important distinction between quantitative change and qualitative change, alluding to a pot of water over a flame. We know intellectually that the temperature of that water is increasing, but only when it gets to a particular point, a boiling point, liquid to gas, does a true transformation, and in his parlance, a true revolution take place. The current academic research library, I will argue, is an environment which is unsettled, it's a paradigm in crisis, and it's beginning to transform in important and, I will argue, very provocative ways. I will identify some relevant trends, which I call the shifting values of the library. I think we would all embrace the increasing move towards customization, being able to respond in our libraries, through our services, through our technologies, to individual needs and preferences. There's a general enthusiasm and a commitment to creating a much more openness, much more of a barrier-free access to information. We have an ATM philosophy very much at work, people who want to do things themselves, a self-service reality and expectation that I think people increasingly bring to all the service environments in which they work, a sense of mutability, a sense of constant change, of hybrid structures and approaches that cut across libraries and within libraries. A real feel at universities for individual and organizational productivity, a much more of a commitment to a sense of usability, an iterative, user-driven design and development process. These, I think, characterize the academic research library in which I'm working. A heightened level of accountability, a call for new measures of impact and relevance, a sense of having to think about our way in marketing ways, how we penetrate our communities, how we diversify the communities that we serve, looking more at agility in terms of how we act strategically, not writing strategic plans, but thinking, behaving strategically, more links between what we say we're going to do and the resources we put behind it, and clearly more alignment with our university priorities. A vision to action requiring careful consideration of risk and capital and sustainability, adopting, embracing the notion that we need to think in business-like ways about the way we plan our future. A sense of competition, the collaborative aura, which really in many ways, in my experience, masks the fierce competition for collections, for people, for resources, for donors, and for use and visibility. And where our library administrative value was traditionally measured by our ability to take a budget and allocate it and spend it properly, is increasingly being evaluated by my ability to attract resources. This is enough. I think I lay a groundwork. These themes will return as we consider a series of imperatives. The key points that I raise as imperatives are not meant to be comprehensive. They're not meant to be selective, but in many ways for me, from an information technologist perspective, they really govern my thinking about the future of library space and the future of library architectural planning. I had a great friend who was the CEO of OCLC for many years, and he had perhaps the most valuable definition of trends that I've ever experienced in my life. He noted that in 1995, there were 4,963 Elvis impersonators in the United States. And by the year 2005, that number has now increased to 17,206. And if that trend continues, by the year 2015, 1 out of 3 people in this room will be making their living in that way. It just shows the power of change. The academic research library must build the network, the essential infrastructure across our universities and across our libraries. This network must be characterized by heightened connectivity, reliability, capacity, and performance. We need security infiltrated into that network, knowing who I am and allow me to do the things I am authorized to do. And we must have new applications that take advantage of that infrastructure that we're building. Robust, multimedia, interactive, and distributed activities that take advantage of this extraordinary infrastructure. This means attending to the campus and library core backbone, upgrading the wiring in all of our buildings, dependable, global, and remote access for our faculty and students, the integration of data, voice, and cable services, finding and funding the network lifecycle, making sure that this is not a one-time investment, but a continuing investment, building the next generation network, the capacity to supplement and replace our use of the commodity internet. As we build libraries, we must give frontline attention to that network that supports the work of our faculty and students. The academic research library must participate in enterprise system development, the systems that improve the administrative work of our institutions, to replace the analog and disparate legacy programs that still dominate so many of our campuses. The ERP urge is linked to requirements for business reengineering in the university. We are faced with a productivity mandate, which demands the integration of functions, the web-based distribution of work and services, and often, and unfortunately, a reduced capacity for local customization. Enterprise systems enforce common practices. Open source, however, provides strategies which increasingly are part of the rhetoric of higher education, the ability to do it ourselves. Academic research libraries, in my view, need to find opportunities for service enhancements and productivity gains in these new administrative systems, and understand the massive financial and staff investments that are going to be required at our universities, sometimes at the expense of academic priorities. Enterprise system projects across the U.S. are replete with financial horror stories and CIO heads rolling all over campus. The Academic Research Library must participate in our efforts to manage identity and security. The intensity of the threat is obvious as we face daily attacks at our universities and cope with persistent virus conditions and break-ins. We must be worried about network efficiency, the maintenance of our system operations, data integrity and protection that can so easily be compromised, and the increasing threat of identity theft, the exposure of a university's confidential personnel data, which is so ominous. And the library is heavily exposed in this area. The challenge is to protect our resources in ways that are responsive to academic cultures, as well as our legal and business requirements, while still delivering a rich array of information under appropriate access controls and detection systems. Many universities have put enormous resources over the last 5 years, both in terms of technology and people, to manage this arena of identity and security. We must enhance and organize better disaster preparation and continuity. We must be able to maintain the work of the university and to recover when we face and experience disasters. This means redundancy in our IT capacity for critical systems. This means refreshed and tested policies and process, constantly reviewed, constantly drilled into the organization. This means the clear assignment of responsibility for handling emergencies. This means rigorous auditing of our procedures and our records management programs that protect our vital institutional data and our systems. Most academic research libraries, and in fact, most universities, are grossly underprepared in this area. As universities, we must build the digital library. We've come to the point, in my view, where quality equals content plus functionality. Not just the ability to locate the information, but increasingly what I can do with that information. The digital library includes, obviously, the published and licensed content that we make available to our faculty and students, the primary content special collections, if you will, that we digitize and present to the world on the public web. Open web content, sites of quality and relevance that we want to preserve and make available to our students and faculty. Institutional content, the uncontrolled and often gray literature produced across our institutions by researchers, faculty, and students. All of this increasingly multimedia, and often requiring the integration of our core library services, the access, the reference, the document delivery, the course reserve functions that have been so physically based in the library, but now need to be integrated with content over the web to our faculty and students throughout the world. These also means that software tools, not just the content, but the tools that are often required for working with electronic text and with spatial information, for example. We must mine the full potential of digital information. We must stop thinking about moving text information online. Electronic and networked information brings us the obvious accessibility and availability, able to provide information all the time, everywhere. But it can be more immediate. It comes faster. It offers richer opportunities for searching it, for probing it. It opens new areas for research, new research questions we could never ask before. It's dynamic. It's fluid. It really brings together multiple disciplines, working together, collaborating, working with all varieties of information types and formats in the common space. A lot of it linked, a lot of it able to be navigated, some of it interactive, that is, we can act on it, allowing the computer to take over the responsibility for the repetitive searching and application of technology, allowing us to work on the intellectual use of that information, the ability to look at things from multiple dimensions, the spatial nature of working online, and perhaps most powerfully, the encyclopedic nature of publishing electronically, able to take all the papyrus that exists in libraries around the world and make it accessible through a common database. The ability to take 50,000 letters of Herbert Lehman from the collections at Columbia and make it available to scholars and students throughout the world on the web. The academic research library must drive the building of content management portals and systems. Portals that handle all types of content. Our goal must be content delivery and findability, with solid content organization through descriptive and metadata standards. We need efficient content workflows, and we need to be able to extend that capability throughout the university with wide integration of our various content management strategies. Too often, these databases sit in isolation, in silos. They need to work together. The gateway or portal as integrator is an essential capacity, as we need to advance the portal also as a real-time processor on our campuses, processor of information inquiries and of information services. Portals can be an effective way to organize and support productive academic work and administrative work, and to bring the digital library into the full array of university teaching and research programs. The academic research library must preserve and archive the content. We must see ourselves as being responsible not only to hold, but to be able to access, secure, and take care of all the information that comes under our responsibility. This means managing analog information in the ways that we've protected it and reformatted it in the past. It means protecting the information that we convert from analog to digital, and really trying to wrap our minds and arms around the born digital information, which disappears and changes so rapidly, and therefore doesn't get preserved for future scholarly use. We also need that robust disaster preparedness capability. This means new approaches to records management that allow us to capture the electronic work of our universities, a failure in most of our institutions. This means identifying, capturing, and organizing the huge volume of digital, educational, and scholarly content being created by our faculty, our researchers, and our students, and really sitting on isolated servers and hard drives without policy, without capture, without protection. It means an academy-wide commitment to preserving the scholarly record. The academic research library must assess carefully the role of the search engine libraries. Google Print and Google Library is not being reported on the back pages of the technology section or the business section of the New York Times. It's on the front page almost every day, and it's appearing as the lead editorial in major newspapers throughout the world. We now have a competitor, if you will, in the Yahoo Microsoft Open Content Alliance, but it's clearly an energy to make as much of the world's scholarly record available over the public web. How successful they will be, how effective they will be, these are open and important questions. But libraries are participating. Libraries need to understand the impact of this change to get beyond the anxiety of what we used to do now being made available to everyone who has access to the internet. We need to evaluate carefully, and there is in fact a major conference tomorrow in New York City on looking at the copyright challenges presented by these Google initiatives. And there are other initiatives in the wings: video, manuscripts, data sets, teaching and learning modules. These will all be part of the Google family if they remain interested and sustain this initiative. We need to understand what this means, not only in our basic collection development and service programs, but also what it means in our thinking about our future space. The academic research library must help to enhance the student experience. What do students want? They want network access anywhere, anytime. Technological ubiquity is fundamental. No lines, no limited hours, services that I care about as a student available on the web. Places for experimentation and fun. Create and maintain technology sandboxes. Places to work with protection and anonymity. Give me privacy space. But help me when I need it. Give me the appropriate level of expertise at help desks, in library reference desks, on the web. Help me to understand information and scholarly systems. I increasingly know that this is a lifelong skill, and my fluency with technology is insufficient. And keep in mind that I'm here for a period of time. Don't let me leave behind the advantages and capabilities that I enjoyed at the university. Think about my role as a graduate and as alumnus in terms of access and use of information. The academic research library must support the course management system and be an integral player in its development. Our systems, our educational teaching learning systems, must enable much more rigorous content creation, the storage and management of those learning materials so they don't disappear when the faculty member goes away, the ability to search and query that information, to distribute it and access and repurpose it, but to also help with the extraordinary challenge of rights management. These are things that libraries and librarians do really well. We must integrate technology and electronic resources purposefully into teaching and learning and plan for faculty involvement and incentives in the use of these systems. We must implement and integrate the advantages of online learning, the interactivity, the flexibility, the collaboration, the administrative functionality, the reduced cost of access, and the support for diverse learning styles. Help our faculty to be more innovative in the classroom and in their interactions with their students. Clark Kerr at the University of California once noted and once described a faculty as a group of individual entrepreneurs held together by a common concern over parking. Our need here is clearly for the academic research library to enhance the faculty experience. What do faculty want? If we listen, this is what they tell us that they value. And you can see the extraordinary set of expectations that a faculty brings to a university assignment. Where does the academic research library appropriately and effectively fit in this inventory? Looking ahead, it is the quality of the student and faculty experience that must drive library planning, whether it's the use of technology or whether it's the design of our library space. We must support the needs of big scientists. When scientists map the universe, when they monitor the environment, when they investigate the gene, they build massive data sets. Much of it unstructured data. They want tools for extraction, for distribution, for collaboration, and for visualization and simulation. They don't have it, they're struggling, they're increasingly looking to the library for help. Can we build the technologies, the standards, the capacities, the spaces to support the new science? Can librarians add value to this process? I call these BHADs, big, hairy, audacious data sets. We haven't figured out how to work with them. The academic research library must play a role in the transformation of scholarly communication. The urge to publish. Why do our faculty produce so much content? Well, publication is the way they communicate. It's part of the academic culture in which they were raised. It's the way their ideas get preserved. It's their source of prestige and recognition. Scholarly communication is the creation, the transmission, the evaluation, and the preservation of new knowledge. The library community has been like a Greek chorus over the last 30 years, standing on the side of the stage, screaming at the academy. It costs too much. It takes too long. We give too much away. You don't care. We are not treating this, at least until very recently, as the important national policy issue that it is. We have let the commercial interest take over what in essence was a guild economy. We have created a dysfunctional market, in many cases with a single source to get the stuff we need, a source that controls the access and controls the price of stuff that we ourselves have produced. There has been enormous conversion, as we know, to electronic strategies to make more of this content available. But what we want and need is a competitive market. We need easy distribution and reuse of publications. We need innovative applications of technology. We need quality assurance, robust, perhaps newly conceived peer review systems, and we need permanent archiving. In some ways, we have tried to do it in Darwinian ways. Let the market take care of it, let the strong survive. And in other cases, we've rolled our sleeves up in the academy and tried to go head to head with the commercial publishers, becoming capitalists in that marketplace. We have failed. Perhaps our right solution is socialist, to take back the means of production into the university. We have done market-conforming things by producing journals. SPARC, the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resource Coalition, is an international group trying to compete in that way. We've done market-distorting things, coming together as consortiums of libraries, negotiating prices, preserving better prices perhaps for the larger and richer institutions, but really not changing the market. We've seen system-transforming initiatives like open access, more and more journals and more content at some point freely available on the web. But what we need, perhaps, are system-busting strategies, the Napsterization, or perhaps even the Googleization of the scholarly record. Imperative number 15. The academic research library must advance the open revolution. Listen to the vocabulary and the rhetoric of the university. Open source, open standards, archives, design, open linking, courseware, knowledge, open access. Barrier-free access is what we are seeking to achieve by economics, by technology, by laws and legislation, and by our traditional behaviors. Openness is not moving forward. We can't pay for information. Technology and digital rights management system blocks access to information. Our federal policies and even our international trade agreements making it much more difficult for us to get at the information, and the way we behave, the way we get things done in the academy, not creating that open working environment for learning and scholarship. The academic research library must advance the repository movement. Think where scholarly work is being deposited and accessed. Going back to the late 1980s with the physics community, spawning a whole series of disciplined repositories, now with current research available on the public web. Increasing efforts within our institutions to capture our own digital records and to make it available in institutional repositories. Consortiums of libraries and consortiums of institutions working together to achieve those objectives. Schools and departments at many of our universities putting up their own records and the work of their faculty. The increasing numbers of individual scholars and faculty and even students who put their own information, their own publications up on their individual repositories. And increasing efforts by libraries to provide that portal, that gateway, so that virtual repository out. How will the growth in the scope, the rigor, and diversity of educational and scholarly repositories reshape the work of the library and the academy at large? The academic research library must advocate the information policy agenda. Too many universities and libraries are out of touch with the legal and legislative developments affecting our interest. The information policy concerns are broad and challenging, and I've listed them here. We must, in every university, monitor these developments, educate our faculty, students, and administrators about what these changes provide, to advocate for the policy positions in our state governments, our federal governments, and the international sector that support the needs of higher education. And when new laws and legislation are passed, be prepared to implement them successfully or to fight them when we don't agree with them. Imperative number 18. The academic research library must fight the copyright wars. Several years ago, I wrote an article in American Libraries titled, "Copyright is Dead, Long Live Copyright." And under the pressure of the editor, this was my first sentence in that article. The academic research library is confronted by a copyright access of evil. He forced me to do that. But what I meant was that we are facing extraordinary challenges because so much of the copyright arena that we work in today is being set by international agreements, decisions that are being made in the World Intellectual Property Organization or in the World Trade Organization. We have seen an extraordinary battery of new laws and legislation. We could expect in the US government a new relevant copyright law every 3-5 years. We are now seeing bills introduced into Congress at the rate of 20 to 30 per year. Courts are deciding a lot of these issues. Intellectual property is one of the things the new Supreme Court justices will deal with perhaps more than even the social issues that dominate the headlines. So much of this is based on what I call copyright imperialism, trying to impose through trade agreements the conservative policies that we've implemented in the United States and in Europe. And in fact, copyright is of decreasing relevance for a lot of the information we make available to our faculty and students. Licensed information is based on not the law of copyright, but the law of contract. And we have limitations unless we negotiate them in terms of what we can do and what our faculty and students can do. We should never adopt user guidelines as a community. We should apply those fair use standards within the context of the information and purposes of the use of that information. We must fight against the application of inappropriate technological controls, digital rights management systems, and we've got to find a way increasingly at the university to define ownership of copyright. Traditional patterns based on analog type works don't always hold up well in our university copyright policies when we're talking about new media for which there may be new imperatives and new profit potentials. The academic research library must participate in the entrepreneurial academy. Universities and libraries must be interested in leveraging their assets, seeking new customers and new markets for educational and research products. This comes under the impact of a financial mandate from those who support us budgetarily, from a competitive mandate positioning ourselves in relationship to other institutions, a prestige mandate. But any entrepreneurial, if you will, e-commerce initiative takes significant development and risk capital. It requires rigorous business planning and market analysis. And cultural and legal firewalls are required between the academy and the commercial sectors of any university. If e-commerce is a valuable source of revenue and reputation enhancement, or is it a slippery and naive slope to expensive and diverting competition? 20. The academic research library must support the globalization goals of a university, a fundamental and distinctive aspect of the work of a subset of research institutions, institutions like Chicago and Columbia. This includes the obvious commitment to international collections, both traditional print as well as electronic, working with international students and researchers, and building support for global faculty research collaboration. We face the challenges of language, of divergent standards, technological and other, the challenges of different legal traditions, and the challenge of cultural differences. The internet exists in most countries in the world, but the information does not flow easily and legally across that network when the laws or traditions of a particular country don't allow it. The academic research library must respond to user expectations. The late newscaster Charles Kuralt once noted that thanks to the interstate highway system in the United States, I can travel from the East Coast to the West Coast and see absolutely nothing. The IT and physical infrastructure are necessary, but insufficient. We know that our users want more and better content, they want more and better access, they want convenience, they want to do things that they have never been able to do before. We're all trying to reduce or at best manage our costs, and we need to be concerned about individual and organizational productivity. Service programs must combine the traditional help and reference desks with telephone and email assistance, online documentation and troubleshooting, department-based support for faculty, even desktop support, service tracking systems to know what's not working, residential consultation for students, lab and classroom support, training support, and 7x24 network and data center operations. This is what is essential in the type of universities we're creating and the types of information and network environments that we want to construct. The academic research library must prepare for expanded accountability and assessment. There are clear institutional expectations and government and funder mandates. We need to be effective and broadly embraced. Measures of user satisfaction. You've done some of that work here. Measures of market penetration. Who's using us? Who is not? And why? Measures of success. Measures of impact. Measures of cost effectiveness. The need to design systems for usability. Systems that are user-centered, participative, experimental, iterative, and user-supportive. Too often, we develop systems, throw them over the wall, and hope that our users like them and that they work. The academic research library must establish a research and development agenda, a commitment to solving real problems in real situations. The R&D capacity of our libraries should be focused on the creation of new knowledge. There will be an article that I'll publish in January in which I say librarianship is an information-poor information profession. We make very, very few good decisions on the basis of data collected and data analyzed. We need to create more laboratories for experimentation. R&D serves as a magnet for new skills in our libraries. It presents potential for capitalization and for technology transfer. It builds potential for more rigorous faculty collaboration with the library. It's a support for decision-making. It fosters a culture of organizational risk-taking. And I can tell you, it attracts federal, foundation, and corporate investment. This, in my view, is a critical capacity that we must develop in the academic research library over the next 5 to 10 years. And lastly, imperative number 24. We must rethink library space planning and library space identity. All previous imperatives, 1 through 23, directly or substantively influence our thinking about and future planning for library space. I have maintained for the last several years that we are building the Trompe-l'oeil Library. Tricks to the eye, buildings that will have the trappings of the traditional library, but in fact, what we are creating should be far more dynamic and progressive uses of library space. Learning space, social space, collaborative space, intellectual space. We have talked today about library use trends and the role of technology as a catalyst to change. We have emphasized over and over again the critical need for flexibility and adaptability in the design of that space. Allow me to digress briefly on this topic of library space planning. About 18 months ago, I was invited by the National Library of Medicine to participate in a conference designed to support their goal of putting up a new library at NLM. My challenge was to argue the case that libraries by the year 2020 will have outlived their need for physical space. This was a very awkward position for me to be in, as in my career, I have been involved in leading or consulting on over 50 library renovation or construction projects. And in fact, I am involved currently with 14 library building projects at Columbia. In my National Library of Medicine talk, and in an earlier library conference debate in Toronto, I made several points that I'd like to repeat here for purposes of provocation and for purposes of conversation. Point 1. Our library space planning creates ambiance without worthwhile function, safety for library administrators without academic relevance, infrastructure without impact. Point 2. Today's high school students will be the university faculty in 2020. Today's babies will be our college students in 2020, my 3 grandchildren. They will not embrace the traditional analog-based, facilities-dependent library of the past. Researchers will be part of interdisciplinary and global teams. Students will sustain a much more episodic and lifelong relationship with higher education from afar. They will be focused on speed, on currency, on convenience, on productivity, on control, and on point of need. This means dynamic, digital, and distributed information and tools. Library facilities, library buildings are not central to this vision. Point 3. Can we continue to justify the continuing investment of hundreds of millions of dollars in expensive study halls that will effectively serve a declining percentage of our core community? Can we continue to justify the maintenance of valuable campus space as warehouses for low use and too often no use collections that are powerfully refreshed, re-energized, and repurposed when they are made available digitally? Can we continue to justify using technology for replication and acceleration, doing the same things, but only faster? Technology must be focused on tools for transformation, doing things we have never done before. And this means breaking librarian professionals' links with buildings. Our professional futures must be untethered from libraries, from library places. And we need to move to the academic department, the laboratory, the hospital bedside, and the classroom. I concluded these 2 talks in which this content and other was presented by acknowledging the wide gulf in values and views, both in the audience and in our broader academic and library communities. And I said at both talks, as the Episcopal minister said to the Baptist minister, "Brother, we both serve the Lord, you in your way and I in his." Academic library space clearly must continue to accommodate our core library services to users. We will acquire lots of stuff and probably a lot of analog print-based material. We need to synthesize it. We need to be able for people to find it. We need to be able for people to take it away. We need tools for helping them to interpret it, to understand it, and we have ultimate responsibility as research libraries to make sure that it is preserved and archived for long-term use. But library space must also reflect, in my view, the changing library roles, not only as our roles as consumers, but the way we participate in the intermediation and aggregation of information through our library digital programs. Libraries are developing as publishers. We are more aggressive as educators. Some of us are taking on core R&D responsibilities. We are entrepreneurial and we are policy advocates. And our library space thinking, planning, and implementation must also reflect those new roles. The structure of the library organization at Columbia combines the university libraries, a network of 25 research libraries across the Columbia campus with massive and continuing to grow collections, but with the integration of very interesting and very purposeful technologies. 35 people who work in the Center for New Media Teaching and Learning, who work with the faculty to integrate technology into their teaching and to develop online courses. Academic information systems, in terms of its help desk and its infrastructure and its core university applications, has moved out of the library. With my happiness, I can now sleep at night and not worry whether the network up and whether email is functioning. But the academic information components, our work with faculty, students, and researchers, continues to be part of this organizational structure. Digital Knowledge Ventures, the group that's responsible for taking digital content created within Columbia and finding markets for it outside Columbia. The Electronic Publishing Initiative, which is a tool for innovative scholarly publishing through technology. You probably have here at Chicago CHOW, Columbia International Affairs Online, one of the products that they've been developing. Both the Center for New Media Teaching and Learning and the Electronic Publishing Initiative, EPIC, are research and development sites, getting grants from Mellon, from the National Science Foundation, from the National Institutes of Health. We also have 3 new units that have just been created: an Office of IT Research and Development, an Office of IT Policy and Planning, and a new Copyright Advisory Office, all of which I believe are responsive to the types of imperatives that I've outlined in the talk today, but for which I need to think creatively about the use of space. We don't get new library space at Columbia sitting in the middle of Manhattan. Our challenge is to use mutation and hybrid approaches and really creative reapplications of the space that we have available. So what do I read in our community? I read a lot of anxiety, an abnormal and perhaps overwhelming sense of apprehension and fear. What McLuhan once said, our age of anxiety is in great part the result of trying to do today's jobs with yesterday's tools. So much, I think, describing the work of our libraries. There's a sense of disruption, an interruption of our normal course or unity, and a constant sense, at least I feel, of being in disorder. Clayton Christensen, who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma, once said that one of the litmus tests is that a disruptive technology enables a larger population of less skilled people to do things that historically only an expert could. That describes in many ways what I've experienced over my 30 years as a librarian, and perhaps what we fear most from the Google enterprise. But we also experience what I feel is a state of utter confusion, unpredictability in the behavior of the complex systems for which we are responsible. And in the education of Henry Adams, and this phrase in many ways governs my professional life, chaos often breeds life when order breeds habit. I want to work in academic libraries that are full of life. Therefore, as we think about the future of library space, we need to embrace this dynamic, shifting vision of the library. Yes, we will always be legacy as Columbia and University of Chicago. We have a historical role that needs to be sustained in the collections that we have assembled and which we need to protect for future generations of users. But we also will be an infrastructure of technology, of content, and expertise. We will be a repository, a preserve, an archive that protects and saves the material that's so important. But we'll also be a portal, a gateway, enabling our faculty and students to move beyond the collections that we provide locally. But we also will be a source of innovation, of research and development, and of entrepreneurial potential. So much of what we talk today is based on a sense of virtuality, which to me is insufficient. And when we talk about virtuality, we must also talk about virtuosity, the expertise that we as library and information professionals bring to this academic community. But we also need to have a sense of virtuousness, a sense that there are values and principles that govern our work, very much driven by our support for education and research, but also by our professional commitment to open access to information. Several years ago, the directors of the 15 largest research libraries in North America got together in Illinois. Martin was there, I was there. And we defined the areas of strategic focus looking forward over the next decade that we as academic research libraries need to factor into our planning, both for our programs, our people, our technology, and our space. And here you can see the types of things that we identified. We were clearly focused on the distributed electronic access of content, tools, and services to the communities that we serve. We could not let go of the importance of high-quality physical spaces, but we had to give equal attention to the high-quality electronic spaces, the workspaces, if you will, that we're creating for our users. Clearly, as I was quoted in a Library Journal article this week, it is a golden age of special librarianship, special collections. Special, distinctive, and global collections define for me what our research library community will be embraced for as we move forward over the next decade. And our ability to archive not only that analog content, but the increasing amounts of digital content, particularly the born digital content, is going to be a critical role. We need to apply technology in innovative ways. We can't lose sight of that technology infrastructure, some of those early imperatives that I referenced. It's staff, the virtuosity that needs to be developed and professionally engaged, challenging some of our traditions, retaining our values, building leadership capacity in this extraordinary arena of information policy. There's a lot of things we want to do as research libraries, but quite frankly, the drift and trends in information policy are making it much more difficult for us to do them. We need to always think about how we integrate into the academic intellectual fabric of the university and hope that we make decisions in the future much more driven by the products of research and development. Let me conclude with a quote and with a story. This is from The Winter of Our Discontent, where the character Ethan Allen Hawley says, "A man who tells secrets or stories must think of who is hearing or reading. For a story has as many versions as it has readers. Everyone takes what he wants or can from it, and thus changes it to his measure. Some pick out parts and reject the rest. Some strain the story through their mesh of prejudice. Some paint it with their own delight. A story must have some points of contact with the reader to make him feel at home in it. Only then can he accept wonders." I substitute in this paragraph the word story for library as place. George Bernard Shaw, the Irish playwright, was opening a new play in London. He wrote a letter to Winston Churchill. He said, "Dear Mr. Churchill, I am enclosing 2 tickets, and I really would welcome you to attend the opening night's performance of my new play in London. 1 ticket is for you, Mr. Churchill, and 1 ticket is for a friend, if you have one." Well, Mr. Churchill quickly replied. He said, "Dear Mr. Shaw, unfortunately I can't be there for the opening night's performance of your new play, but I really would appreciate if you sent me 2 tickets to the second night's performance, if there is one." I don't think that we're really focused today on issues of academic research library survival, but I do think we are talking about our relevance and our impact. And a lot of that relevance and impact, I think, will be translated, and communicated, and delivered in terms of how we conceive and how we implement our library space. Thank you very much.